Hey Chloe, I think today is a good day for book club.
I think every day is a good day for book club, Kaatje.
Welcome to our podcast where we talk about the books that we buddy read. Since 2020, we've read over 150 books together.
We're going to talk about what we like, don't like, and everything in between. Spoilers abound, so listener, beware.
I know that I talked to you about this recently already, but I am very interested to go back and actually track what number we're at because it's been a while since I checked and I think we might be pretty close to 200.
That's wild, and I feel like needs to be celebrated. We gotta do
Isn't
some
that
kind of
wild?
celebration.
I know. Gotta throw a party, bake something,
I
get some
love
of
it.
those. Do you remember there was a donut shop where we used to go to college that sold
The shapes,
the
yeah.
number donuts? I remember getting those for people for their birthdays. We could get like a 200 donut.
I love it. I'm sold.
But today, the book that we're talking about, whatever number it is Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. This is her fiction debut. She wrote a memoir a couple of years ago that we read and really enjoyed. And I think based on how strong I thought her writing was in that book and just how provocative and daring the topics in that book felt and how thought-provoking it was, I had high expectations going into this.
Yes, I felt the same way. I was very excited when I saw she was doing a fiction book because I really enjoyed the memoir, really in particular enjoyed the way that it was written and the way that she described things, the way she looked back on her life and reflected on things. And I was hoping that some of the writing style would pull through into her fiction, even though, of course, it's going to be different not being like her own life. But I was hoping some of those stylistic choices would pull through. And I gotta say, I did not get that.
How many stars did you give this book just before we get in?
I gave it 2 stars.
I gave it 3. I
That's
didn't
kind.
love it, but I yeah, I don't know. I could see what she was trying to do, I think.
I saw a lot of reviews that said you either loved it or you hated it. Like there aren't a lot of people who were middle of the road.
Hmm.
Um, so it's interesting that you were.
Well, I think it makes sense that it's a book that people would either love or hate because it seems determined to make the reader uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people have more tolerance for that or are more willing to see that as being purposeful. And some people are like, why would she do that? Especially with a topic like this.
Yeah, we got to get into the topic. So, Half His Age, as you might expect, follows a main character who is a high school senior, Waldo, who begins to lust after a man who is older than her. Though I will say now, he is more than half her age.
Does it say how old he is? Do you
I
remember?
think he's 39.
And
And
39 divided by 2 is 19, 19 and a half.
19 and a half. Good. Yeah.
Thank you. It took me a second.
And I'm like, I understand we're just kind of rounding, but just I felt like it should be pointed out. Anyway, so Waldo is 17 at the start of the book and has an English teacher, Mr. Korgy, who she begins to lust after and then subsequently starts flirting with and kind of puts herself in front of him because she wants to be in a relationship with him. And he agrees. He also wants to be in a relationship with her. And so they start dating, and their relationship follows the course of most of Waldo's senior year. I think it starts a little bit into her senior year, but most of the year is spent with them in a relationship with each other while Mr. Korgy is still married to his wife, and he has a young son whose age I don't know because they barely talk about him. So the most we hear about the kid is that there are Cheerio crumbs in the Subaru from his snack time.
Yeah, because they dig into Waldo's knees when she's performing sexual acts in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Yuck. Anyway, Waldo at the beginning of the book, we kind of get an insight into her life, her family life. So she lives with her single mom. Her mom has a bunch of boyfriends who kind of enter their life on a rotating basis where she becomes obsessed with this guy and then he'll leave and her mom will be heartbroken and then she'll find a different guy and then he'll leave and her mom will be heartbroken. And so it's just kind of this cycle where she feels kind of neglected by her mom, if not in a literal sense, then definitely in an emotional sense. And then she has a friend named Franny, and Franny is very devout Mormon. Waldo has felt more and more disconnected from her, I think in part because of the religion, but also because she's like finding Franny more and more annoying because of the way that she talks about how instead of saying ing, she doesn't pronounce the G's at the end of her words. So instead of saying annoying, she would say annoying, which I agree would kind of get on my nerves. But I was like, you guys have been friends for so long and this has never bothered you until now. I don't know.
I found it kind of hard to read when it was spelled out because Jennette would spell it out like EEN instead of ING. And there were moments where
Sure.
so it would say like something.
Mm.
And it was kind of hard for me to read. I was like, just spell it. I'll say it in my head. Anyway.
Yes, and Jennette McCurdy has described the book as an exploration of female rage and power and desire, as told through the lens of a lonely and ravenous 17-year-old girl. This is from a New York Times interview that she did. It says she desperately wants so many things. She wants clothing that will make her feel like someone other than she is. She wants beauty items that she thinks will make her feel like something other than she is. She wants a person who she thinks will make her feel like something other than she is. She's desperately seeking identity and solace and comfort in many different areas of life. And like we've talked about, one of those areas is she starts to lust after her creative writing teacher. And this creative writing teacher, I think, creates too many opportunities for them to be alone together, as much as he, I think, kind of like tries to give the appearance that he is not interested. Some of the situations they're in are very inappropriate.
Yeah, and I don't feel like how do I want to say this? I don't feel like he necessarily totally initiates the relationship, but I also don't feel like he discourages it in the sense that, for example, he and his wife invite Waldo over for dinner at their house, which I thought was so strange.
Just because he's like his star student. But there wasn't any
Yeah.
reason for it beyond that. Like they weren't actually discussing her like submitting writing anywhere or anything like that.
Yeah,
It
and
was
it's
just like,
like,
I like her, meet my wife.
yes, which I just think would be so strange if your husband who is 40 says like, I'm just super interested in this 17-year-old girl, like let's have her over for dinner. Like that just sounds weird. Sounds inappropriate. And so I struggled with that and the dynamic there because we can get into this later about whether Waldo pursues him or he pursues her, but I just had a hard time with that.
Sure. Well, yeah, let's talk about the timeline. So they have this dinner where she's at his house, and then later they go on a walk together, just the two of them. She kisses him, and he's like, hey, this is not appropriate. Do not kiss me. Which, good job. Nice points, I suppose, for this one instance. And then later, she's at a school dance. She's at a winter formal or something. And she finds him in a classroom and she crawls into his lap and like dry humps him and kisses him again. And he's like, no, no, but she keeps doing it regardless, which I did not love that scene. But from there, he, again, after trying to like at least give the appearance that he doesn't want it to be happening, he does continue to have a relationship with her and continue to have sex with the 17-year-old. So I think in some ways, Waldo could view herself as the pursuer and might like cast herself as the pursuer. And Mr. Corky could be like, oh, well, she came on to me, blah, 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 blah. But I don't know if that necessarily reflects reality. Like, do you think that Waldo was the pursuer in this situation?
I think that we as readers are intended to feel like she was the pursuer, but I don't because she is a child. Like, legally, she is just a child.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that you can say that someone who is not even old enough to, I don't know, buy a scratch ticket can be considered a pursuer because she's so young and she is, even if she is romanticizing herself in her head as the pursuer and saying like, this is what gives me power, I want to do this, I just feel like that's not realistic when the man is so much older than you and there's such a clear imbalance, not just in age but also in power, because he's her teacher. He has a position of authority over her. And it felt to me like she had such kind of an out of control life at home, with her mom being so unreliable, or like her mom not really being there for her. She can't depend on her mom. She wanted something that she felt like she could control. So in her head, she's saying, oh, I'm initiating this. I'm climbing in his lap at the dance because he wants me, even though he's saying no. I can see in his eyes that he wants me, which, by the way, gross sentiment. No.
Mm-hmm. It
And
was very assaulty in a way that I was like, you.
yeah, and I don't think that in this particular situation I can justify Waldo being the pursuer.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think it's one thing for her to view herself that way, but I think reality is a different animal. I do think though, that, like in this situation, Waldo might cast herself as the pursuer. I think that Mr. Corgi really victimizes himself, not only in this dynamic, but in like basically everything, because he's a failed writer and he doesn't care about his wife or like we've talked about this, but he's just like such a loser in a way that I was like, why do you like him? Like, I know that she likes him because it's a level of, trying to control something, but he just was not appealing as a person. So, like, beyond the psychological, like, what does this dynamic do for her? On like a surface level, I said, why do you like him?
Yes, and I was trying to understand why she liked him, because even if I don't agree with the choice that she's making, I still want to be able to understand why she's making it. But she describes him in a way that made me feel like she was repulsed by him. Like, she talks about his body in a way that is not like complimentary. She talks about him being paunchy and old.
Let me pull
and
up
having
the quote because this is the first time she describes his physicality, I guess, and
Yeah.
it repulsed me to read it. And this continues through like all of the sex scenes that she brings up that it's just so, I don't know. You'll get it when I read it. Or but listeners will get it when I read it. It says, I fantasize that I lift his shirt and touch his paunch, watch it jiggle, study the curly hairs on his belly and lick them straight. I fantasize that I crouch down under his desk, unbuckle his pants, hearing the deviant jingle of his belt as they drop to the floor, reach into his boxers and cup his wrinkly balls. I've never wanted someone's gross parts before, only the good parts, blah, blah, blah. But with him, I wanted all, even the gross parts, especially the gross parts. And I said, ew! Why
But
is
also,
this like the way you're describing this?
but also, what good parts? You make it sound like he has none.
Yeah.
Like,
If there are good parts, you're not bringing them up. I'm not aware of them as a reader.
in another interview that I watched with Jennette McCurdy, she talks about how in the first drafts of the book, Mr. Corgi was considered more attractive, like more generally viewed as an attractive man. And she decided to change it because she felt like that was more unrealistic. And I don't agree with that. I said I would understand more why a teenage girl would be attracted to her teacher if he was attractive. Like, why are you describing him in a way that makes him sound like he's not at all attractive to anyone? She makes it sound like he's just the worst guy in the world.
Yeah, because it would be one thing if she was like, objectively, he's not the best looking, but like I am attracted to him, whatever, whatever, something about him like draws me to him. I think that would make sense. But saying that someone being handsome is unrealistic, I think is maybe just insulting to teachers in general. Like, are teachers not allowed to be attractive?
Right. I'm like, why can't he be attractive? I don't understand. What would him being attractive, why would that be a detriment to the story? I don't understand.
So wild. Well, I remember seeing, okay, so also in this New York Times article, she says, Mr. Corgi, if I want to touch on empathy toward him, is a creative writing teacher who has had so many failed dreams. None of his dreams panned out. He's living with a lot of regret and disappointment, chugging along, going through day to day, fulfilling his duties and obligations as a husband, father, and teacher, and trying to feel okay with himself, despite really feeling shame about not living up to his expectations for the life that he wanted for himself. I think that's still possible while having a teacher who is like attractive on like an objective level. Like, I do think in taking these first drafts and writing Corgi as handsome and villainous and that feeling like too on the nose for her, I think maybe she swung too far in the other direction and made him too repulsive.
Yes, and it's like you said, at least make it so we understand why Waldo is attracted to him. Like, even if I disagree, I can understand, the perspective of other girls or other women might find a man attractive that I do not. Like, I can understand that. But when you're describing a guy in a way that makes me feel like you hate him. I do not understand the
Yeah.
attraction.
That's the thing is that throughout the book, as much as she was obsessed with him and she kept like wanting him to love her and kept, I guess, just like talking about him every single day and like scrolling through his Instagram and touching herself, I never got the impression that she liked him. She
Hmm.
always seemed fascinated and disgusted at the same time.
Yes, and I said that's not romance. That's not love.
No, and I guess maybe that's the point. Like, this book is definitely not a romance,
Oh no.
especially considering, like, when he does finally divorce his wife, which happens much later in the book, when she finally gets him to leave his family, when she finally gets him to choose her and tell her that he loves her, she kind of completely loses interest. You know, they move into this apartment
Yeah.
together. He makes her watch Criterion Collection movies, and she falls asleep because she hates them. She just like she hates him more and more and more.
Yes, and there's so much like disdain for each other because I also got the sense that he doesn't really like her the more he gets to know her once kind of the the what is it rose colored glasses come off, and it's like he is trying to make it work because he's left his family at this point. He's not seeing his son because his wife, ex-wife, excuse me, has said, okay, well, you had an affair with a teenage girl. I don't really feel comfortable with you hanging out with our son right now.
Mhm.
And which I don't think is unfair, but anyway. But at that point that he's now lost control in his own life, now he's like struggling to hold on to Waldo, even though there's this seems to be this underlying current of like guilt that he wants her to feel because I left my family for you, you made me do it, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And so he resents her and he wants her.
Yeah, well, it's like once they don't have to sneak around anymore, and once it's not like this exciting forbidden thing. I mean, it's still obviously taboo, but once they don't have to sneak around anymore, it kind of loses its appeal because then they have these long stretches of time together where they just have nothing to say to one another. Because she's a 17-year-old girl and he's almost 40, and obviously they aren't going to like the same things, and obviously they aren't going to have that much to talk about, especially because the thing that he seemed interested in, at least from my perspective from the beginning, was her writing talent because he is, this failed writer and he thinks that she has such a good thing and she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't even like writing.
No, and he says like I can just see the passion that you have, and she literally tells him she's like I have no passion. I only did it to get your attention.
Yeah. I only did it because I knew that you liked it and I wanted to make you like me. Which is,
He says
a
no.
recurring theme of this book is she keeps trying to make people who don't like her, or maybe people who don't give her attention, give her attention. Like her mom, like we've talked about, kind of emotionally neglected her. She wants her
Hmm.
mom to pay attention to her. She doesn't because she's so preoccupied with her boyfriends. She wants Mr. Corgi to like her. He, at least for a time, doesn't give her the attention that he wants because he is rightfully focusing his attention on his wife.
Which there's a scene later on. They're still dating, and I can't remember if it's after they break up briefly or before. But there's a scene where Waldo goes to Mr. Corgi's house, and they're having sex in his bedroom.
While she's on her period.
Yes, while she's on her period. And we can go more into the details, but specifically, his wife comes home while they're having sex, and Waldo has to run into the closet because Mr. Corgi essentially throws her across the room and is like, hide, go in the closet. So she's there in the closet, naked, holding her hand like between her legs to catch her period blood. And meanwhile, Mr. Corgi's wife is trying to seduce her husband because she wants to have sex with him and she's trying to
Wants
like,
to reconnect.
yeah, wants to connect. And I mean, I already felt bad for his wife, but that scene in particular made me feel so bad for both his wife and Waldo because they're both being treated like crap. And I'm like, you're in the closet catching your own period
Free
blood.
bleeding onto the carpet.
Like, if that's not a sign of how little he respects you, and also how little he respects his wife, because he's like, no, I mean, I don't think so. And his wife is really hurt by that, which, not that I'm saying I want them to have sex while Waldo's in the closet, but like, she's trying to initiate something and like rekindle their relationship, and he's just
Mhm.
blatantly disrespectful to both her and Waldo.
It was like humiliating for everyone involved, actually.
Yes, and I said, hate him.
And it really took a moment where Waldo was feeling so vulnerable she was like, this is such a gross thing, my period. And she felt like by them having sex that he was like accepting the gross parts of her. And she felt very like, she explained feeling very validated by that, by being like, oh, he still desires me even though I'm like disgusting right now because I'm on my period, like whatever, whatever. And so by him immediately shoving her in the closet, like as it was happening, I feel like it emphasized the shame that she felt, like even more.
Especially
Yeah.
then, because I feel like we need to talk about what else happens in that scene. Before she is hiding in the closet as they're having sex, like you said, he's accepted that she's on her period. He says he doesn't care. And then she asks him or tells him, I don't remember specifically how it's worded, to slap her in the face with his bloody dick. And like,
We're gonna have to put an explicit tag on this.
I know. I'm like, do we talk about it? Do we not? I don't know.
I feel like the big point is that it was a really grotesque scene. Like it felt gross, it felt disgusting. I felt disgusted by Mr. Corgi
Yeah,
reading
yeah.
it. And so like I guess it's good if impressionable young teenagers decide to read this book. They're definitely not gonna romanticize Mr. Corgi and be like, maybe I should pursue my teacher. It's very obviously not a relationship to put up on a pedestal, or even like a sexual relationship to put up on a pedestal or to try
Mm-hmm.
to aspire to. But it was graphic. Even not even just their sex scenes, because all of their sex scenes were pretty like ugh, like not
Mm-hmm.
fantasies. Not that they should be, but I also feel like again it swung too far in the other direction.
Well, and the other thing that really bothered me about it, besides the obvious disgustingness of it, is that in that scene, Waldo is like fighting back tears. Like she's trying not to cry and she's telling him, like, no, I want it. I swear I want it. And he's like, okay, well, you asked for it, kind of a thing. And I'm just like, I understand that in the context of this book, we're trying to say that she is like, she feels that she is in control of this situation and is saying that this is something that she wants. But I'm like, there's no way he's unaware of the fact that she is trying not to sob while they're having sex. Like, and that's why I really struggle with how much part of why, I should say, that's part of why I really struggle with why he victimizes himself so much, is because you're not a victim. Like, you are taking advantage and you are hurting her right now. Unless she somehow has some magical ability to hide that she's almost in tears. But like, you know, if someone's about to burst into tears, it's
You could
pretty
tell. You
obvious.
should be able to
You
tell.
know,
Yeah.
especially in a moment like that where everything is already vulnerable in a sexual moment. Like, there's no way he's not aware.
Obviously in that scene she was particularly like upset and humiliated, but every single sex scene in this book was just like gross and grotesque and like uncomfortable to read. And I'm thinking to like the scenes where she masturbates, and there's the one scene where she has like food on her fingers and still like she's at a restaurant with the nice boy her own age who she does date briefly, which we can talk about, but she goes to the bathroom and she has like chili cheese whatever all over her fingers, and she's touching herself and thinking of Mr. Corgi. And I was like, you are going to give yourself an infection. This is so gross. What are you doing?
And oh my gosh, speaking of how she touches herself, think about Mr. Corgi. There's the scene where she breaks into their house and like
I
sets her.
forgot about that.
Yeah, they're at dinner or they're out of town. I don't remember, but Waldo literally breaks into their home, settles into their living room, makes herself a snack, and watches their
Funny.
wedding video. And I said, this is wild that this is happening right now. And she, like, I think it's like a bottle of his cologne that she masturbates with. And I said, where did this come from? Like, this is
And
a
if I
really,
wasn't sure that Waldo needed to like discuss some mental problems before this really cemented that.
I said, this is such a specific thing that's happening. Like, this is, this is
I said
wild.
this is very troubling and you really need to talk to somebody. I think that was
Yeah.
maybe a big issue with this book, is that there was never any sort of like third party insight into what was happening who was able to give any sort of like not even advice but just like context for why Waldo might be feeling the way that she is. She does end up telling Franny about the relationship, and Franny is like, that's bad, that's inappropriate, but she doesn't really value Franny's opinion, and Franny never really goes further than that. I kept comparing this in my head to My Dark Vanessa, which we read a couple of years ago, kind of a similar teacher student romance relationship. But in that book, there was like a period of time where she was separated from when it was happening versus reflecting on the experience. And she talks to a therapist who was able to like get her to see how inappropriate the relationship was. But in this, because she was never able to like fully realize the inappropriateness of the relationship and like why she was doing the things that she was doing, I was never convinced that she learned what was wrong.
No, and she didn't even have a chance to evaluate it because the book just kind of ends abruptly, and we can go back. I don't mean to like end it here, but she basically walks away from the relationship and the book ends. And of course it's, I would say, a good thing that she's walking away from it, but there's no reflection on what she's been through or why that's the moment she walks away. It's just kind of like, oh, well, this is over now. And to the point that it kind of caught me off guard when I turned the page and saw the acknowledgments. I was not prepared for the book to be over, but it would have been nice to see that reflection, whether it was like even a short epilogue would have been nice, I think.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a theme throughout the book that Waldo just wants and wants and wants things. You know, she has this shopping addiction where she'll buy stuff and then she'll get it and she realizes she doesn't actually want it anymore. We see that also like with the relationships with her mom and Korgy. And so by the end of the book, she kind of very suddenly just lets go of this desire and she's like, oh, I don't actually need them. I'm just gonna go off on my own and be by myself. And I guess I get that as a realization and an epiphany that she's coming to. But for it to be so sudden, for us to not see any sort of fallout from that, I thought was, like you said, a little bit too abrupt.
It kind of felt like, well, we don't really know how to wrap it up, so it's just going to be open-ended. So I'm looking at one of these articles that you shared, and I'm reading in particular this quote that says, I'm never writing something that's intentionally provocative, and I'm certainly never writing anything for shock value, McCurdy said. I really try to write for truth, and I can't help it if that's shocking. I can't help it if that's noisy or alarming. In fact, if it is those things, that's probably an indication that there is some truth there and a conversation that's needed to be had. And I just think that that's ridiculous to say that she's not writing for shock value, because I'm not saying everything in the book is going for shock value or everything she writes is going for shock value, but you can't tell me that there's not like a little bit of that in your mind as you're writing some of these really explicit, really graphic sex scenes, especially in this book, between a teenager and a man who's almost 40 years old. Like, you have to be aware of the fact that that has a shock value to it when Waldo is in the closet catching her period blood between her legs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think whether or not she meant for it to be shocking, it definitely is shocking. And I think particularly the way that the sex is written in this book, none of it is, I don't want to use the word normal, but none of it feels just like romantic or like mediocre. It's all like aggressive and violent and like uncomfortable. To me, that's what I felt when I was reading it.
Yes, and because Jennette goes on to say, like, in these interviews, this interview and some of the other ones you sent, that, like, she's aware that people are going to be upset by what is written and that it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be frustrating. And I feel like all of those things, if you're saying that those are the emotions that people are going to feel when they read this book, you have to acknowledge that there is a shock value there that you have incorporated into the book, because people aren't going to be absolutely outraged by something that is not at all shocking.
And even if it wasn't initially purposeful, I think once she had that realization of how it would be received, I think it was purposeful not to temper it in any way.
Yes, exactly. And so it's like, okay, maybe that's not what you went into it doing, but I do think you need to acknowledge that that is how the book came out at the end.
We should go back and talk about, first of all, the definition of Waldo, because it's so random that her name is Waldo for no reason. Like, that's such a silly name for nobody to ever bring it up. So I know that you found the definition of the word, if you would like to talk about that.
Yes, I had to look it up for the same reason, because I thought to myself, who names a child Waldo other than the starring character of the Where's Waldo series?
She was born wearing glasses and a striped shirt, and her mom was inspired.
And according to Oxford, the definition of Waldo as a noun is a remote manipulator, as for puppets operated either mechanically or electronically.
Yeah, so I guess that comes back to like her viewing herself as a pursuer and a controller and a manipulator, but
Yeah, I still struggle. The only situation that I feel that she truly manipulates is maybe her relationship with Nolan, because I feel that she's taking advantage of him in different
poor
ways.
Nolan. Nolan is Waldo's very short-term boyfriend. He is her age,
Thank
I think.
goodness. Well, they're in the same class at least. So,
Yeah, they're in the same grade. She hates him basically the whole time that they're
yeah.
dating. She fantasizes about Mr. Corgi the whole time they're together. I think she and Mr. Corgi had briefly broken up.
And so she begins dating Nolan, who is really sweet. He's very thoughtful, very respectful of her, and really wants to have, like, I felt like a real relationship with her. He says things like, I think you're beautiful, and she kind of waits for the caveat that he'll say, like, to me. Like, I think you're so beautiful
Oh
to
yeah.
me.
Hmm.
Because that's something that other guys have said to her, guys her age have said to her. And he just says, I think you're beautiful, or you're so beautiful. And there's no like disclaimer or justification. And I know that that doesn't seem like a lot, like that seems like, minimum. But for Waldo, it's a standout because that's something she has not experienced with guys her age. And I just thought it was very telling of Nolan's character and how he treats her, that he sees her as she is. She's beautiful.
Yeah, and
And
also telling of the way that Waldo views herself because she doesn't think that she is objectively beautiful. She just thinks that
yes.
she is beautiful, like through the eyes of whatever man is complimenting her, or she like thinks that they don't view her as objectively beautiful. So, like you
Yes.
said, Nolan is just such a sweetheart.
He is. And as they're dating, she ends up going to his house one night and they have like basically a family game night with his parents. She has
Hmm.
dinner with them, they play some games, and then Waldo and Nolan go upstairs to quote unquote study, and they end up having sex. And this is the first time that Nolan has had sex, and it's something that he, from what we gather as a reader, is something that he sees as like important. It's personal for him. And Waldo, who has had sex many times before this, just feels like, okay, like, I wish this was Mr. Corgi. Like, this isn't a big deal to me. Your room feels immature. You have Star Wars bed sheets. Like, you're not a real man. And all of these really terrible judgments, I
She
thought, while
does
she's
not
thinking
like
of.
him.
No,
She
she
does
does
not
not
like him at
like
all, and
him.
it's so sad. And it's so
And she's,
insulting.
yes, and she's like, I'm gonna try to enjoy it. It's like, well, you're not like doing him a favor by
Yeah, you don't have
like
to be here.
right, like nobody is telling you that you have to do this. You're telling yourself you have to do this and you don't. But
Yeah.
anyway, so that's one of the big moments that stuck out to me. But then after that, they continue to date for a while and they end up going to, I think it's the prom together.
Hmm.
A lot of formals at this school. So it's one of the dances that they attend together, and he
It's
comes to pick her up at her
it's
house.
two.
And
There's
well,
two
well,
dances.
whatever. So he brings like a bouquet of flowers. He does like these really sweet things, and Waldo's mom is impressed. She says like multiple times, "Oh, he's such a good guy, like you've got a good guy there," things like that. I mean, we know that Waldo doesn't really value her mother's opinion on men super highly, but I did think it was telling that her mom noticed and said, he's a good guy, like you
Yeah.
have found a good guy. So they go to the dance, and Waldo has dressed up for this dance in a way that she knows Mr. Corgi will be attracted to. She wears like a dress in the color he loves on her, and she does her hair the way he likes and all these things. And she gets to the dance, and I think there's a moment where she decides, no, I'm just gonna be with Nolan now. So she goes over and kisses Nolan and then breaks that off and makes eye contact with Mr. Corgi, who is glaring at her.
She very specifically kisses Nolan in front of Mr. Corgi, though.
Yes, that's a good clarification. And he's like arms crossed, glaring at her in the corner, like, what do you think you're doing? And I said, she's a teenage girl at a dance. That's what she's doing. And then the next chapter starts, and Corgi and Waldo are having sex in the bathroom.
She snuck away from her poor boyfriend prom date to go have sex with her teacher, her married teacher.
Yeah.
Poor Nolan.
And by the way, very uncomfortably, because first she's like on the sink in the public bathroom and the water's gushing all over her dress, and then they have sex in the stall and the toilet's like flushing under them, which I will
Surely
say
it was
I
like
didn't.
spraying up too.
I know, I was like, you're getting public
Yeah.
toilet water all over. Anyway,
And after the dance, Nolan does end things with
good for
with
him.
Waldo. Good for him. Yeah. I think after she completely abandoned him at the prom, he kind of came to the realization, if he hadn't already kind of slowly been realizing that she did not like him back and did not have the same strong feelings for him that he had for her. And so he makes the decision to be like, hey, I can see that you don't like me as much as I like you. And for that reason, I'm going to remove myself from the situation. And I thought it was interesting that Waldo was so surprised by that. She was like, wow, as much as he likes me, he is deciding to end things. And that's like so novel to her because that's not something that she has ever done.
And in that scene, I felt like that showed that Nolan, this 17 or 18-year-old high schooler, is more mature than Mr. Korgy, the grown
Mhm.
man who is supposed to be embodying, like, oh, he's all grown up, he's, you know, he knows things, he's seen the world, he really thinks that he's something. And Nolan is being more mature than him because he said, I'm going to remove myself, I'm not being valued. Good for
Yeah.
him.
If she doesn't see my value, I will walk away. And he was right for that.
Speaking of people who I feel Waldo does not respect, I think we should talk about her friend, Franny.
Okay, yes, let's talk about Franny.
Franny's Mormon background comes up a lot, and that
Mhm.
when Waldo goes over to Franny's house, which I will say I felt like they were very welcoming of her in their home. She's
Yeah.
there quite a bit, and she goes for like Thanksgiving, holidays, things like that. But when she's there, Waldo is always kind of, my perspective, judging the family for the practices of their Mormonism, like when they're praying and going through prayer before dinner, or they have church nights, things like that. Waldo's just always kind of at a distance looking down on it, I thought. And there is one scene where she talks about how part of why she feels that way is because she attended church with Franny at one point, and the message was about basically friending the friendless. And Waldo says, oh, that's what Franny thinks of me. I'm the friendless. I'm like her charity case that she took on. And I don't know if I think that's fair,
Because
but
they had been friends before that point.
yeah, they had been friends for years. And Franny hadn't, at least from what I felt like we saw, been anything other than welcoming. Like, she brings her into her home, gives her a place to hang out, place to be. I guess even if maybe the relationship did start that way, I felt like Franny still wanted to be her friend, even if that's why she first talked to her, was so that Waldo wouldn't be alone.
And is that really such a bad thing?
Right. People shouldn't be alone. But then
Mhm.
Franny kind of disappears in the middle in the middle of the book.
In the middle of the book,
So,
Franny. Well, Franny kind of disappears because Waldo becomes so obsessed with Mr. Corgi and she knows that she can't tell anybody about the relationship, especially not Franny.
which is really a sign of an unhealthy relationship, the isolation that Waldo puts
Mhm.
herself through and goes
Yeah.
through, and cutting off all other like obligations so that she can always be available when Mr. Corgi texts and says, "Oh, I've got 15 minutes" or whatever.
She
It's
starts keeping
romantic.
like different clothes in her car so that she can like be ready to wear something cute in case he calls.
I thought that was wild.
That's why. She was like, "Yeah, I just kept this a tiny little skirt in the trunk of my car just in case." Okay, we can also talk about her mom. Towards the end, she just tried to get help for her love addiction. It says typical signs of love addiction include mistaking intense sexual experiences and new romantic excitement for love, constantly craving and searching for a romantic relationship, an unhealthy fixation on another person, which may include excessive fantasizing, obsessive compulsions, potentially even stalking, achieving a sense of euphoria from a fantasized relationship, feeling desperate or uneasy when separated from a partner. And so obviously Waldo sees those patterns in her mom. We know that she's had all this string of boyfriends who she's neglected Waldo in favor of. But I do think we kind of see that same kind of pattern in Waldo's feelings for Mr. Corgi.
Ooh, go on.
She fantasizes about Mr. Corgi so much, and she kind of drops everything else in her life for the
Mm.
sake of him. She lets her whole world center on him until he chooses her back, and then she kind of loses interest because she's so desperate for him to like her. Where it talks about an unhealthy fixation on another person, which may include excessive fantasizing and potentially even stalking. Like she sneaks into his house and masturbates on his cologne bottle. If that's not stalking
Mm-hmm.
behavior, I don't know what is. And the way that she again just made him the center of her world and like made being able to have any moment of time with him be all consuming. I
Mm-hmm.
just think that it was a similar kind of pattern.
I think that parallel is important, especially because it does show how her mother's traits are being passed down and how they can, you know, how your parental relationship can affect what you do and how you are. Another thing that I thought was interesting about it was that it made me think a lot about how Jennette McCurdy describes her relationship with her real mother in her memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, and how she talks about how their relationship is not healthy for a multitude of reasons. But I saw some reviews and some comparisons online that said that this book, Half His Age, while it is fiction, it feels like an extension of I'm Glad My Mom Died. And this is one of the ways that I felt like that was a valid assessment, just in the way that the relationship with Waldo and her mother is really unhealthy and really kind of difficult for both of them to navigate through. And so there's that, and there's also the fact that Jennette McCurdy grew up Mormon. She struggles with her friends' Mormon upbringing. And then Jennette has talked about her relationship with an older man when she was on the set of iCarly, when she was, I think, 18 when she was in the relationship, and he was in his 30s. And she said in some interviews that as she was writing it, she realized she had a lot of unprocessed rage that she hadn't gotten through. And
I think that makes
so
sense.
all of these things are very valid, and I felt like make sense. But the reason I'm saying this is because I want to know if you thought of it as a continuation of I'm Glad My Mom Died, if you felt that way at all.
Well, I think my opinion would be so different if I hadn't read her memoir and if I hadn't like known these things about her life. Like I almost feel on some level that the book would be I don't know if I want to say that. I don't know if I want to say that I think it would be stronger if I didn't know as much about her.
No, that's fair though. That makes sense.
Because we know about this past experience that she's had, we're able to kind of like look at it as an extension of that previous story. But I do think that every author kind of brings the experiences of their lives to the things that they're writing. I think it's very common for people to write what they know. It's just that I'm not always as acutely aware of what the author knows. And so on one hand, I think it's nice that she was able to, process these feelings and process this rage. But at the same time, through reading this book, I don't know if I was always convinced that trauma had been fully processed, just because of the way that like different things were written and the conclusions or lack thereof that Waldo was able to come to towards the end of the book. I think maybe if she wrote this book even later in her life, it maybe would have been stronger because there would have been firmer conclusions about the nature of the relationship and the way that it changed Waldo or the way that it affected her outlook on the world.
It does make me wonder too, if she had written it when she was older, if the sex scenes would be as aggressive and graphic as they are.
Well, I thought it was really interesting that I watched an interview with her, the one where she's wearing like the blue Nike turtleneck. There's a lot of sex writing in this book, and there was only one way to write that sex writing. It sounds bad, but I think it was a very good thing that I got pushback from my editor. He wanted me to write sex in a more flowery way. And ultimately, I just could not, because that's not how this young woman views sex. That's not how I view sex. It's not how really anybody I know views sex. I think there can be so much anger underscoring sexual encounters, specifically at a young age, and there can be so much shame behind it. And I wanted that to come through. I wanted the aggression of sex to come through, how animalistic it can be, what a primal, almost violent act it can feel like. I wanted to write sex in that way, not in a poetic way.
Surely there's a middle ground, though. Like, I understand, okay, you don't personally view sex as this flowery romantic thing, or flowery loving thing, whatever word you want to use, and I get that, but I think that surely there's a different way to describe it that doesn't make it so aggressive or so like hurtful to Waldo, like I said earlier, when she is trying not to cry in these situations. I don't think it has to be incredibly graphic and incredibly aggressive or super flowery. Like, I think there can be a middle ground.
Yeah, and I think that's what I meant earlier when I was like, when I tried to use the word normal. And I was like, why can't I just have normal sex? It was just like not overly poetic, not overly violent. Like, there's gotta be something in the middle that's just like normal. I don't know.
They had sex. Like,
Yeah,
there you go. Full
I
stop,
don't
full
know.
sentence. There it is.
Well, I think like the thing that I liked so much about I'm Glad My Mom Died was not necessarily like how provocative it was, because you get that from the title. But what I really liked was
Mhm.
I felt like she looked at the relationship with her mom in a really nuanced way. She was able to look at her mom with a lot of empathy, as much as her mom really hurt her. And she was able
Mhm.
to say, like, I'm glad she's gone, but do still miss her in some ways. And this book I disliked more because I felt like it was lacking in that nuance. And I think that this discussion of like her saying sex can only be viewed as something that is like aggressive and animalistic is very illustrative of that, lack of nuance and kind of like a stripping of nuance. Because it can be a lot of things to a lot of people. And her saying like, this is what sex is like for me and all of my friends, I think is really reductive.
Yes, and on that note, I was reading in one of the other interviews that she said any parental relationship that she writes, particularly mother-daughter relationship, is going to be unhealthy in some way because that's what she knows, and she doesn't feel that she can write a healthy parent relationship because she doesn't have experience with it. And I'm paraphrasing, but she basically is saying that because she did not have a healthy relationship with her mother, she's not going to write that ever. And I think that that's really limiting as both a writer and for being an author, because just because you don't have personal experience with something, I think you should still find a way to write about it, especially if you are going to write more fiction novels, which,
Yeah.
according to this interview, she is.
And especially if she seems so determined to write truth. Obviously, different people can have different versions of what is true for them, but kind of ignoring the fact that something might be true for another person that isn't true for you is, like you said, very limiting.
Mm-hmm.
It made me really sad, the the sex scenes in this book. For as
Yeah.
disgusting as they were and as like off-putting as they were, it also made me really sad because I was like, the fact that this is all that Waldo has ever experienced is heartbreaking.
Yes, and the fact that she's allowing herself to accept it. Like, she's just saying, okay, well, I either have sex I don't care about with guys my age, or I have sex where I feel like not valued with men who are older than me. It's like,
Mhm.
there's more.
There's
There's more out
gotta be
there.
more to life.
I want to talk about the writing style itself,
Oh, sure.
um, and the fact that I didn't enjoy it. But I
Very
think
simplistic.
something. Yes, very simplistic to the point that I just felt like the writing was maybe a little immature. In my mind, as I was reading it, I thought, okay, maybe that's because Waldo is young, and this is a way to kind of reiterate the point that she's very young in this situation.
Sure.
But part of why I struggled with it is because, like you said earlier, I'm Glad My Mom Died is so thought provoking, it's so nuanced, and it's so mature, I will say. And so this was just difficult for me because I felt like the level of unnecessary detail in some scenes, like, I don't need to know every single item that Waldo donated to Goodwill when she cleaned out her drawers. I don't need to know that she wiped the drawers down with a makeup wipe. Like, I don't need that level of information. And so I don't know if it's because she's a young main character or just the way that Jennette McCurdy wrote it, but I struggled with that.
I think I wasn't like as bothered by the writing style, although in the audiobook it did feel pretty choppy. It's
Mm.
narrated by Jennette McCurdy, so I guess she was able to deliver it in the way that she wanted to, but there was just something that was so detached maybe about the writing style that I think was really indicative of Waldo's character. I thought it was interesting when I saw the cover of this book, which is like a close up of a girl sucking on her middle finger. Obviously, like tells you what the mood of the book is going to be. But the design on her nails is like this kind of flame
Mm,
design
mm-hmm.
that took me back to the mid 2010s. So when I started this book, I thought it was going to be a period piece, like a 2015 sort of era book, and it's set in the present day. And I remember being so, I don't know, just taken aback by that because I said, does she have her nails painted like this in 2026?
I love that that's what you picked up on for the timing. That's fantastic. Should we talk about how she leaves at the end?
Sure, yeah. Mr. Corgi orders them plane tickets, orders them. Mr. Corgi buys them plane tickets. I don't know why I said that. He
Orders
buys
them
them
over
plane
the
tickets.
web.
And so they're going to go to Hawaii. They're in the airport. And I thought it was particularly notable because Mr. Corgi had gone on a trip with his wife earlier in the book to Hawaii to try to reconnect
Yes.
with her. And so now he and he and Waldo are not connecting, so he's like, maybe I'll try this tactic again to get us to reconnect. I'll take her on this big fancy tropical vacation. But they're in the airport at the gate about to get on, and Waldo's like, okay, I gotta go to the bathroom quick. But instead of just going to the bathroom and then coming back, she leaves the airport and walks away, goes on her own vacation to a place that she was supposed to go with her mom, and her mom will not be going with her because when Waldo gets home to find her mom's in bed with a boyfriend again and apparently is not trying to fix her love addiction like she had been claiming, or like she had been trying, maybe.
Hmm.
But her mom had said earlier in the story to never get on a plane for a man, and Waldo does not.
Good callback. I forgot she said that. I thought, what a power move when she just walked out of the airport. I was like, all right, okay.
I was like, I maybe would have communicated to him. I mean, obviously, Mr. Corgi is the bad guy in this situation, but I maybe would have texted him. She just like completely leaves.
I
I
did
would have
feel a
said
little
like, don't
bad.
wait up.
I
He
did
does
feel a
not.
little bad that he like bought the tickets, and because tickets to Hawaii are not cheap. I mean, I don't know
Mhm.
what they are from Alaska, but having gone to Hawaii on my honeymoon, I can say they're not cheap. So there was a part of me that was like, oh, on a teacher's salary, like that really had to hurt.
Yikes.
But
Wait,
I'm
doesn't
glad
he
she
quit his
left.
job too?
Does
If
he
he's trying to be
quit?
a full-time
Did
writer? I thought he did, unless I'm
oh,
remembering.
I don't remember. I must have forgotten that. But then he gives up on his book. He like is in a ball on the floor
Mr.
one day
Corgi
when
is such a loser. I like cannot even emphasize enough how much of a loser Mr. Corgi is. He's the like literally the worst.
he's such a stereotype too of like a
Mhm.
troubled writer, and like yeah, it's annoying.
This was obviously a book that was meant to make us uncomfortable, and it succeeded at that. So I guess that is at least some level of success and some level of like good job for, creating a book that obviously had such an emotional impact on these readers at least, and I'm sure on so many other readers. But I did kind of feel like just more could have been done with it. Maybe if she had taken more time for Waldo to like really reflect on things more rather than the book ending so abruptly.
Yeah, it was very fast paced, especially like chapters were just a couple pages and everything moved very quickly, and I just didn't feel like we got much for reflection, but I will choose to believe that Waldo is reflecting now, wherever she drove away to.
All right, that brings us to the end of the episode. Be sure to follow us and rate us 5 stars. That really helps us out and helps more people to find us. We also have an Instagram and a TikTok at A Good Day for Book Club Pod. You can follow us here on Spotify, or you can follow us on YouTube. Subscribe. If you have questions, comments, requests, or thoughts about this episode, you can send us an email at agooddayforbookclubpod@gmail.com. Happy reading!
Happy reading!